माझी बाईया जाओ रे অকুল দরিয়ার মাঝে আমার ভাঙা নাও রে মাঝি বাইয়া যাও রে মাঝি বাইয়া যাও রে অকুল দরিয়ার মাঝে আমার ভাঙা নাও রে মাঝি বাইয়া যাও রে
Sunderbans, planet Earth's largest delta, where two of the most iconic rivers, the Ganga and the Brahmaputra, meld and disappear into the giant Indian Ocean. Its thousands of mangrove swamps, hundreds of low-lying islands are now disappearing at the fastest pace in human history. This is the story of the hardscrabble lives of millions of impoverished human masses that have long called the Sunderbans their home. Struggling now to literally stay above the water, a day-to-day contest with natural and man-made disasters. Ganga Sagar, where Hinduism's most sacred river, the Ganga, ends its 1500-mile journey from the Himalayas. For centuries, it has been a pilgrimage for millions of Hindus. For Chanchala Mandal, however, being here has been anything but a pilgrimage. For several years now, Chanchala has worked as a restaurant cook in the small town of Sagar Dweep, the home of Ganga Sagar. "45 years old, with a daughter and 2 sons, Chanchala works grueling hours to supplement the meager income of her husband, who too is a cook. Chanchala's 70-year-old father, Badal, works at the same restaurant where she does. He works 14-hour days baking rotis. The Mandal's migration to Sagar Dweep began 35 years ago. At the time, they lived in the village of Khasimira, a few miles from here. As the waters of the Sunderbans began submerging farmlands around 1980, Badal and many others abandoned their homesteads and moved to the nearby island of Ghodamara. Incredibly, Khasimira village does not exist anymore. Some 5 years after Badal left it, it vanished under seawater. By 2015, half of the Mandal's new home, Ghodamara too, had been lost. Eventually, Badal left Ghodamara as well and came to settle at Sagar Dweep. Badal had never returned to Ghodamara since leaving it. It would thus take only a little persuasion to get him to retrace his steps. When she heard that her father was headed home, Chanchala decided to join in on the historic journey. The Sundarbans Delta are over 19,000 square kilometers. As much as 3/5 lie in Bangladesh and 2/5 in India. But this ecologically contiguous region is separated by territorial boundaries. In Bangladesh, the Sundarbans is primarily defined in terms of the protected tract, while in India, it is defined both in terms of the protected ecological habitat and the human habitations around it. The Sunderbans are the very lifeline of hundreds of thousands who for centuries have lived in its periphery and thrived on its munificence. That life now faces a real danger of being wiped out. The waters have continued to rise and submerge much of the delta in the decades leading to the 21st century. This has been a catastrophe for the poor and marginal peasants living in West Bengal's districts such as the Chobis Parganas. Entire villages with homes, farms, markets, temples and roads have vanished underwater. In his ancestral village, Badal's family owned 8 acres of land on which it raised a decent crop of indigo. His family was among the better off there. But as he was growing up, rising water levels caused by Himalayan glacial melts were already swallowing up farmlands for kilometers all around, devastating farming prospects. For years before he left his village, Badal would make a new home every time the old one went underwater. After setting out from Sagar Dweep to return to his once adopted village, Badal and his daughter shortly reached Kuchuberia village, about 30 kilometers away. A low early morning tide helped them sail down the river from there. Both father and daughter were a picture of emotions flitting between sadness and elation. 35 years ago, this river was barely 150 meters wide. Today, its width is 10 kilometers. In the last 70 years, many villages have been submerged, displacing hundreds of thousands. Many more are next. An hour's boat ride reaches this party of 2 to Ghodamara. Their first sight is another boat full of people and household items. No doubt, the beginning of another migration. Badal says that back in 1980, the river was at least 2.5 kilometers away from here. Expanding since, the river has eaten up at least 4 large villages forever. But life has moved on in the 3.5 decades since Badal left Ghodamara. Nobody here recognizes them now, nor do they know anyone. Later, Badal runs into a childhood friend. It was indeed a touching moment. The friend insisted to take Badal home. For hours, the two were catching up, comparing notes, sharing tales of sorrow. For Chanchala, of course, the return to Ghodamara was a different experience. She was barely 10 years old when her family left this place. The memories that she could recall were deeply unsettling. Even as a child in Ghodamara, Chanchala says her family lived under an unending shadow of sadness.
আমাদের বাবাও নদীতে পড়ে গিয়ে ভেসেছিল, তাও খুব কষ্ট পেয়েছি। বাবা মাকে খুঁজে পাইনি, খুব কষ্ট পেয়েছি। পাওয়ার পরে এখানে দীর্ঘদিন থাকি, তো বাচ্চারা খুব ততটা জ্ঞান পড়ে না, থাকার পরে সাগরে যাই, সাগরে যাওয়ার পরে ওখানে থাকি, থাকার পরে ওখানেও খুব কষ্ট করেছি, এখানেও মানে খুব কষ্ট পেয়ে 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 আমি পড়াশোনা পুরোটাই বন্ধ করে দিয়েছি।
এখন দেখলাম যে সমস্ত জায়গা ছিল সে সমস্ত গঙ্গার গর্ভেই চলে গেছে। আমি 35 বছর আগে যা দেখে গেছিলাম, কিন্তু এখন এসে দেখি সে সমস্ত নেই, বুঝলেন? কিন্তু আত্মীয় স্বজন সমস্ত এক জায়গায় জোটো হয়ে গেছে, ঘর বাড়ি সমস্ত এখন চেনার মতো নয় হয়ে গেছে, এখন পরিচিত ঠিক মতো আর পাচ্ছি না।
As more people heard of Badal's visit, they flocked him to offer greetings. When Badal and Chanchala sailed again for Sagardweep, a crowd had collected to see them off. Natural disasters have indeed wreaked havoc in the Sundarbans. Sea levels are rising faster than they were in the previous decades. The surface temperature of seawater has also increased. Massive rains hammer the Sunderbans every year for 4 months from June to September. The rains bring acidic salinity deep into the farmlands, not only devastating the standing crops and the mangroves, but also ruining the soil for future farming of rice and indigo. According to the experts from the Department of Marine Sciences of Jadavpur University, when the water recedes, it leaves behind salt patches. Analyses of various cyclones going back more than a century have revealed an increase by over a quarter in the frequency of high to very high intensity cyclones. One of the deadliest such cyclones visited the hapless here in May 2009. Codenamed Ayla, the cyclone formed over the Bay of Bengal and wreaked phenomenal depredation across Bangladesh and India. More than 300 people were killed, nearly half in India. 1 million were displaced. Flash floods made timely relief impossible. Shortly after Ayla, scientific tests in the affected regions found that salt had penetrated much deeper into the ground. Even before Cyclone Ayla, 24 Parganas was among India's poorest districts. Now its people scrape through by catching fish in streams inside the forest. But fishing inside the forests is illegal. For every meal, they have to break the law. Selling that fish would also be illegal. Most villagers who have perforce turned fishermen end up selling their fish at throwaway prices to middlemen. This has worsened their vicious cycle of poverty. And who would know this better than Anwar Beg? Once upon a time, his family had enough land in their ancestral village of Mausuni to be counted among the affluent. His father, Kalu, caught and sold enough fish to take good care of his family. But a decade ago, that happy story began to fade into a distant memory. Like millions others in the Sundarbans, Kalu Beg too found his land swallowed up by the swelling waters. Every year they would make a new home. Every year, that new home would be washed away. When the recurring tragedy became unbearable, Kalu Beg quietly passed away one night.
আমাদের এই নদী ধারে তো সবার আগে ঘর আমাদের উড়ে যায়। এবার এই অ্যালবাসটা ছিল, অ্যালবাসটা ওখানে পড়ে আছে, দেখা যাচ্ছে ভেঙে একদম প্রথম গুঁড়ো হয়ে যাচ্ছে। ওই একটা তিরপুল দিয়েছিল আর 1 কিলো চিড়া আর চিনি মোটামুটি দিয়ে পেয়েছি এ পর্যন্ত, আর কিছু পাই। আমার ছেলে 4 জন, 2 মেয়ে, 2 স্কুলে পড়ে, ছোট ছোট বাচ্চা। তো আর মা আছে আমার কাছে, আমার বোন আছে 3 জন, আমার কোনো ভাই নেই, সবে আমার উপরে মোটামুটি নির্ভর সংসার।
Barely a year ago, a cyclone ripped the latest home that Anwar and his wife Lesman had built for themselves. Their 4 children are now faced with a dark and uncertain future. Once a proud landlord, Anwar today pays a monthly rent of 200 rupees for shelter. Finding work is extremely hard. The waters have hardly any fish anymore. Every day is a struggle. Lesman can make the rice last for the entire family only by adding extra water to it. Vegetables are a luxury. Lentils are once in a rare while.
একজন খাটতে 6-7 জন খেতে। নদী ধারে বাড়ি ছিল, ওখানে বাড়ি নদীর জলে ভেঙে গেছে, এখানে ভাড়া বাড়িতে এসে আছি। সব ধারে কষ্ট, নদীতে আমাদের মাছ ধরি, ওখানে 2 বিঘা জায়গা ছিল, ব্যাগ নদীতে পড়ে গেছে। আমাদের ওখানে মাছ ধরি, কোন সময় মাছ হয় কোন সময় হয় না, আমাদের প্রচুর কষ্ট হয় এতগুলো বাচ্চা কাচ্চা নিয়ে খেতে।
Riaz and Akbar have little clue how the swirling waters around them have destroyed the good life that their parents once knew. Their father Julius has seen 5 cyclones destroy his home as many times in a short life of 40 years. Every house he built anew sooner or later crumbled under lashing rains and winds. At least twice a month, water invaded each of his successive homes, submerging them up to 3 feet for hours before receding. Made of mud, his houses could not stand such a battering. It is at night that the water levels rise to their highest. The terrified and helpless folk can do little more than pass the nights sitting on their beds. His last home was also Julius's last hope. But once he lost it to the cyclone, he became truly destitute. He tried to make ends meet by doing odd jobs around the village. But there was hardly any paid work, as other villagers too were hard up like him.
এখন বর্তমান একদম জায়গা জমি নেই, যার ফলে আমরা খুব বিপদে আছি। যদি কিছু সরকার তরফ থেকে যদি কিছু আমরা এই ঘর বাসস্থ করার জন্য যদি কিছু পাইটাই সহযোগিতা সরকার করে, তাহলে আমাদের খুব উপকার হয়, আমরা ছেলেপুলেকে মানুষ করাতে পারি। আমার জ্ঞানত অবস্থায় আমি 2টো ছেলেকে তো মানুষ করাতে পারলাম না, কারণ আমাদের ওই নদী বাঁধ ভেঙে আসছে এরকম অবস্থা।
With neither hope nor any local options, Julius has been making an arduous journey of over 1,000 kilometers every few months to the southern state of Kerala for work as a construction laborer, or, when even that is beyond reach, pull a cycle rickshaw. The Sunderbans are now a vast endangered ecosystem. Not only are its natural characteristics under severe threat of extinction, its human population is now on the brink, with over 4.5 million people being landless and entirely dependent on agriculture. With rains being the only form of irrigation, the building of earthen embankments to protect the crop from encroaching brackish water is a prerequisite of this system. But that system hardly works against the climatic onslaught. As a result, agricultural productivity is extremely low. Due to the intrusion of saline water, no more than a fifth of the vast nearly 300,000 hectares in the region produces a second crop.
People have tried to use technology, cope up to that challenge. So you invested in technology, invested in better quality of seed, etc., that can withstand salinity up to a certain level. Then went to another level, salinity. Then you also then modified your seeds. But now the salinity level has increased to a level that this technical match is not happening anymore, or it will not become cost effective anymore.
Sheikh Ramzan is another victim of climatic assault and bureaucratic apathy. He realized early that life in the Sunderbans might not be sustainable for long. So he took the long journey to Kerala to find menial work. It wasn't easy, he says. 12-hour-long workdays brought hardly any income. Not knowing the local language made it even harder. And he missed his family terribly.
যার জন্য কেরালা গেলাম, কেরালায় বহুত কষ্টে, ওখানেও কাজ বহুত কষ্ট হয়। কি করব, কষ্ট হলে এখানে ভাই বোন ছোট ছোট আছে, তাদেরকে তো দেখতে হবে। মা বাবা বহুত মেহনত করে আমাদের মানুষ করেছে, তাদের বয়স হয়ে গেছে।
Something as basic as using a toilet becomes impossible when water enters homes. Successive governments, both at the centre and in West Bengal, have had little success in providing the people of Sundarbans toilets. Of course, clean drinking water is an even remoter luxury. Salty water is their only source for all needs and use. Back home now, Sheikh Ramzan has been determined to not let the children around him suffer the same fate as him. While he can do little to change their practical realities, he has taken it upon himself to educate the youngsters in basic reading and writing, as well as practical knowledge about clean water and other basic needs. The children's only other access to learning is also clogged. When the water hasn't entered their school, the building serves as a refuge for families fleeing their homes. In either case, classes can hardly be held there. Lives of hardship made worse by the day. Yet another example of such God-forsaken fate is Aparna Mandal's. Married to Mrityunjay Mandal 10 years ago, theirs was truly a marriage between a man of mud and a woman of water. But the promises of a happy life began to be disturbed soon after Aparna moved to Bali village to start a marital life. It is estimated that more than 4/5 of the Sunderbans face cyclones and storms regularly, and the Mandals are among the affected. Every time the water ravaged their household, the Mandals, their 3 children, and Mrityunjay's aged parents would take refuge nearby. Like so many others, they would make a new hutment once the water receded, and this is the activity they are engaged in once again. The basic things that go into a household are being collected. Some things are of course retrieved from the previous house, but most else is lost underwater. Their oldest son is at school, but every time they can't pay his fees, his name is struck off the rolls.
ঘর বাঁধছে, থাকতে গেলে তো ঘর বাঁধতে হবে। তা আয়লা ভেঙে গেছে, তাই ঘর বাঁধছে। ছোট একটা বাচ্চা আছে, তাকে তো বাঁচাতে হবে, তাই সবাই মিলে ঘর বাঁধছে থাকার জন্য।
Usha Maiti lives with both her parents and grandparents and studies in the 9th grade. For years, she has been determined to become an engineer so that she can build a wall to block the water from coming into her native Botkhali region so that people can live peacefully ever after. But rising waters have already swallowed up 2 of her schools. The first time that happened, the school was shut for 6 months. Classes slowly resumed under a tree. When the waters came charging into the school a second time, Usha began to fear she would never become an engineer. She has never known electricity, nor seen her house lit up, but she watches television at home on solar power.
আমি এখানে একটা স্কুলে পড়তাম, স্কুলের নাম ছিল বটখালি কাদামিনী অবৈতনিক প্রাথমিক বিদ্যালয়। ওখানে আমি পড়াশোনা করতাম, কিন্তু 2 বছর নোনা জল এসে ভেঙে যায়। ওটা ভিতরে স্কুল হয়, ওখানে পড়তে যেতে খুব কষ্ট হয়। বাড়িতে পড়াশোনা করলে নোনা জল এসে মাসে 2 বার জল ঢুকে বইপত্র সব ভেসে নিয়ে চলে যায়, তাই পড়াশোনা কষ্ট হয়।
Indeed, tapping the sun's energy is the one huge silver lining through the Sunderbans in both India and Bangladesh. Sagar Dweep is the only place given conventional electricity because it is a pilgrimage town. Electricity poles have been planted even in the river to supply power across it too. But other than that, there is only solar energy. While people have mobile phones, they don't have enough electricity to charge them. For that, they now hire generators. In one go, a generator can charge up to 60 phones, charging some 20 rupees an hour. It is estimated that only 200,000 homes in the Sunderbans, or less than 20%, have government-provided electricity. Ironically, most villages in the Sunderbans have a school. What is heartening is that children flock to them, but none offers education beyond the 10th grade. Higher education remains an unfulfilled dream. According to the government figures, the Indian Sunderbans have a literacy rate of less than 65%, compared to the literacy rate of more than 76% across West Bengal.
Primary education, preliminary education is almost 100%. So naturally, higher secondary will be a little less, and graduation, that is there. Many reasons. One of the reasons, of course, is one contributing factor is accessibility and the avenues for pursuing higher education.
With agriculture and fishing both teetering as livelihood options, many villagers are increasingly scrambling to make ends meet through one of the oldest livelihoods here, collecting honey. The Indian Sunderbans have long been a massive resource of honey, not just for the domestic market, but for the entire world. That too has been under strain for years. With the government determined to curb forest encroachment, the deep interiors are off limits for everyone except the forest officials themselves. Government permits for honey collection are difficult to obtain. As with their fish, these poor, mostly unlettered villagers can barely market their own products, so they often get only a fraction of the price for which their honey eventually sells elsewhere. Collecting honey is not just painstaking, but also dangerous in the Sunderbans. The presence of wildlife, especially the famed Bengal tiger in the region, has made it a very risky proposition. The Sunderbans are the world's only mangrove tiger habitat.
বিক্রি করা হয় 1 কেজি 2 কেজি যে যেমন নিতে পারে তাকে সেরকমই দেওয়া হয়, আর বাদ বাকি কলকাতার লোক নিয়ে যায়। এইভাবে আমাদের মোটামুটি জীবন জীবিকা নির্ভর করে এর উপরে।
In 1878, the British rulers had notified the forested parts of the Sundarbans as reserved or restricted for the purpose of protecting the wildlife as much as its eco-habitat. Nearly a century later, in 1973, the Indian government declared an area of about 2,585 square kilometers as the Sunderbans Tiger Reserve. More than half of that reserve was declared as the Sunderbans National Park in 1984. Forest officials discourage villagers from going deep, lest they should fall prey to the tigers, who are estimated to kill between 30 and 100 people every year. As often honey collection is done in the very areas that they are not allowed to enter, the families of those killed by the tigers in these parts cannot claim government compensation. In ancient Sanskrit, from which her name is derived, Shanti signifies inner peace. But this frail village woman has had her peace destroyed forever since a damp winter morning of November 2015, her husband left home, never to return. Leaving his home in Banikhali village of Chobis Parganas district at dawnbreak, Arjun had gone to the forests with 3 other villagers to fish. A tiger that lay in prowl had attacked him, mauling his head and legs. Shanti has had no financial succor from the government because it is illegal to fish in what are the world's largest mangroves. Shanti says Arjun knew of the dangers but had no option to feed his small family of 4 that includes 2 children. The threat that eventually took Arjun's life has only increased since then for other villagers who must undertake the same dangerous journey every day to keep their families alive. The rising waters of the Ganga, the Brahmaputra and the Meghna rivers in the Sunderbans delta have worsened everyday life in these regions.
এক সপ্তাহের জন্য কাঙ্গা মারতে নিয়ে গেছিলো ওরা, জঙ্গলে তো যেত না, এক সপ্তাহের জন্য নিয়ে গেছিলো। গ্রামে কাজবাজ করতো, বাইরে কাজবাজ করতো, তাতে সংসারে টুকিটাকি করতো, জঙ্গলে যেত না। জঙ্গলে গিয়ে ওখানে বাঘে ধরেছে, ওখানেই মারা গেছে, জঙ্গলেই মারা গেছে।
As evening falls, smoke begins to rise from food being cooked in neighboring homes. But for Shanti, there is no light that can fill the darkness created by the death of her husband. Those who live in the faraway metropolises of Kolkata and Delhi, where decisions that directly influence Shanti's life are taken, can hardly have a measure of her hardships. Shanti and millions of others like her struggling to survive in the Sunderbans are among the worst affected victims of climate change. And yet, they have no voice in the global debate that sees presidents, prime ministers and experts crisscross the globe to fight the very crisis that climate change is bringing to the planet's billions like Shanti. Rinku Mandal understands Shanti's grief. Rinku's husband Sai is hospitalized for wounds received in a tiger attack. The attack was so ferocious that the tiger's paws are etched forever in scars across his body. Thousands of rupees have been spent on his treatment, but Sai cannot still recognize anyone or even sit up like a normal, healthy person. Sai and his friends left home late one evening and cast their nets far and wide, working through the night. They had hoped especially to catch crabs, which bring higher profits. Before leaving his hutment at night, he had duly prayed to the forest deity as well as to his boat. They knew of the threat of a tiger attack, yet they kept moving deeper into the forest. Thus, they worked for 2 nights and a day. It was near dawn of the second morning, as they slept in the boat, that the attack came suddenly. Sai wrestled free and jumped into the water, but not before being severely wounded. As his friends began screaming, the tiger escaped. The water around them had turned bloody red. They retrieved him from the water and took him home.
যাচ্ছি না এইখানে জমি জায়গা ঘর বাড়ি হাঁস মুরগি ছাগল বাড়ি ঘর শ্বশুর ছিল তার বাবা ঠাকুরদারা সবাই ছিল গাছ কলা গাছ আছে আম গাছ আছে নারকেল গাছ আছে এইখানে ভালো লাগে কোথায় যাব আমরা
The beasts of the wild do not recognize man-made boundaries. Bangladeshi citizens living in their part of the Sundarbans have their own tiger terror stories to tell. The worst of these tales are from the lands that are within the watery expanses. The village of Burigaluni is located on one such strip of land in Khulna district. Here too, commoners are not allowed to venture into the forest, but as with their counterparts across the border, venture into the forest they must to put food on the table. Half a century ago, these people lived in the Sunderbans, but the government relocated them here after declaring the forests as protected. 60-year-old Bagh Baksh lives in Burigaluni, one of the 5 villages created here for these migrants. 8 years ago, he went fishing with a few others, entering the forest illegally. Barely hours later, a tiger attacked him, mauling his back and arm. Bagh Baksh's friends hurried him back home. It would take a year's treatment for him to walk again. Unable to function anymore as a boat maker, as he had all his life, destitution stares at him. Indeed, abject poverty is a way of life in the Sundarbans on both sides of the international border between India and Bangladesh. The average income per person on the Indian side is barely $50, which translates into less than 1,000 rupees a month. For the 2.5 million Bangladeshis residing just across the border, it is marginally higher at 90 cents a day. A chronic state of penury and a general lack of sustainable livelihoods has proved disastrous for healthy living. Disease is widespread.
সুন্দরবনকে রক্ষা করার জন্য আজকে ইন্ডিয়া এবং বাংলাদেশের একটা যৌথ কর্মসূচি আমাদের 2 গভর্নমেন্টের নেওয়া উচিত
Today ends a desperate 2-week wait for Sulochana, a housewife who's suffering from severe eye problems. Today she will meet a doctor thanks to mobile health clinics run on boats in some of the remotest parts of the Sundarbans. For hours before the boat clinic docks up by this village of Lahiripur, anxious residents have been queuing up under a scalding sun to have their once-in-a-fortnight consultation with the doctor. It would be 4 hours before Sulochana gets time with the physician. She is shocked as the doctor tells her the trouble lies in neurology. Sulochana begs him to reconsider. After some tests, the doctor alters his diagnosis to cataract. Though better than the brain troubles, the new diagnosis poses a new dilemma. She would need to travel for the operation, an option she can hardly afford given her hand-to-mouth existence. Working from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., this mobile unit is focusing on eye complaints today. Jyotsna, the nurse, says day camps typically handle about 400 patients over 8 hours. That means 50 patients an hour. thus devoting barely a minute per individual. On either side of the artificial divide of the Sundarbans, millions of residents have no recourse to hospital care because no such service exists for miles around them. Their only hope lies in this nondescript boat that functions as a mobile primary care center, coming here once in 2 weeks. It is nothing short of a miracle that this boat is actually able to reach into parts of Sundarbans otherwise inaccessible by any other means. Sometimes the boat may also evacuate a patient to the nearest hospital, but villagers tend to avoid that. If it is the man of the house, then his absence would imperil the family's only source of daily income. An ill mother's departure would leave no one to cook and look after the children. The hardest is when a child is ill, because he or she cannot be sent off to a hospital alone. And for either parent to accompany the child for days or weeks upsets the family's basic existence. According to a 2010 study by Kolkata's Institute of Health Management Research, the Indian Sundarbans are rife with communicable diseases. Morbidity here is much higher than the average in West Bengal, of which the Sundarbans are a part. Arsenic poisoning, skin diseases, arthritis, heart ailments and asthma are all found in higher than average numbers. With people forced to forage for food in the forests and rivers, snake bites are fairly common too. About half the children are chronically malnourished, making them yet more susceptible to illness, especially gastrointestinal and respiratory diseases. The government estimates that there is only one doctor for every 50,000 people in the Sundarbans. Not surprisingly, quacks abound. Revered in this region, Dr. Shyam is the most reliable medicine man here, come rain, hail or sunshine. But in fact, Shyam is not even a graduate. Some years ago, he had worked as a doctor's assistant in a nearby town. After a few years, he decided to settle here and begin his own medical practice. Not only does Shyam treat patients, but also dispenses medicines to them. He could well be earning up to 1,000 or more rupees every day. When we pressed him to give us an interview, he declined, saying that he had no time from tending to his patients. The tragedy is that the local people are well aware that he does not have any degree to practice medicine. They still go to him because they have no option. But all is not lost. The governments of the two countries, India and Bangladesh, have long been working on mitigating the difficulties of the terrible lives of millions of their citizens caught in the vicious climatic cycles of the Sundarbans. In 2011, the two countries also signed a memorandum of understanding towards jointly implementing several such measures. The government of West Bengal in India created a Department of Sundarbans Affairs in 1994 with a Minister of State rank in charge of it. But progress on taking the joint agenda forward has been slow.
If movement of goods and people were allowed across the border to take advantage of the relative strengths that these people have. Fishing and fishermen from the eastern part, which is the Bangladesh side, that skill level is so much higher than what it is here. Whereas, certain amount of farming skills are much higher here. Say for example, pan, which is a commercial crop. If you look at Western Sundarbans, which is the Indian part of Sundarbans, the kind of pan cultivation skill that they have is probably unmatched and therefore can be taken advantage of on the eastern side. So, there is a lot of area for cooperation. There should be some mechanism for people, goods and services to go back and forth between the two countries within the same region.
Be that as it may, the fact is that for the millions of people living in the Sundarbans and struggling to keep their heads above the water, The actions of their governments in faraway capital cities provide little immediate succor. For them, the frightening uncertainties created by the rising waters, the occasional cyclones, the lashing rains, the attacks from the tigers, and above all, the failure of finding sustainable livelihood is making a miserable life worse with the passage of time. The divide between the needs of the people and the needs of nature, the priorities of power and the priorities of the powerless is widening in the Sundarbans. Can partnerships that transcend barriers of territory, knowledge, interpretations and structures bridge the divide? The lives of people like Chanchala Mandal, Shanti, Aparna Mandal, Julius Khan and their families are not just stories that need to be told, but indeed questions that need to be asked. Our response to the questions that they pose will indeed determine the story of Sunderbans.
সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী দেখি সুন্দরী কেওড়ার হাসি, শুনি বাঘের হুঙ্কার, শুনি পাখির সুমধুর কণ্ঠস্বর, ঢেউ তোলে নদী সাগরের জলরাশি। সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী দেখি সুন্দরী কেওড়ার হাসি, মৌমাছিরা মৌচাকে মধু ভরে, হরিণ হরিণী খেলা করে, বনকুসুমের গন্ধ বাতাসে আসে ভাসি। সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী দেখি সুন্দরী কেওড়ার হাসি, সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী, সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী, সুন্দরবন দ্বীপবাসী।